Okay, welcome to those that have ventured out to join us live, and then to those that are watching online. We trust that over the next two sessions, this evening and next week, you'll find some value in what is being taught, because I think that it's a sort of a subject, a topic that there's a lot of stuff online, but you don't always get the stuff that is from people who are dealing at the forefront of what is actually happening when it comes to dealing with children, raising children. And so over the next 2 weeks, we're fortunate in that we've got a lady who's got many years of experience in just counseling families, talking to families and helping them through situations. And so Pat Hill is going to just share, just sort of from her side of things, what she's learned over the years of what families should be doing more of, what they can be doing. And I know she said to me that times have changed, but I think the fundamentals of raising children and being parents, I think there's certain things that haven't changed. And so although society's changed and our environment has changed, I think there's some things that remain constant. So I'm going to hand over to Pat, and thank you for being willing to help us out.
You don't have to clap, I promise you. Sheldon's quite right. Although life has changed tremendously, when I think of my younger years growing up, we played outside in the street all day. It was safe. It was free. We didn't have any electronic equipment. We were left to just fight out our battles ourselves. And I think parents today are under a tremendous much more strain than they ever were in the past. With moms working all day as well now, it makes a huge difference. And I think cyberbullying and internet access to material that young children should not and do not need to see makes life so much harder. I think to keep track of it must be incredibly difficult. The influences are not always what you as parents want for your children, is it? Well, what I see, parents are just a lot more stressed and hard-pressed to spend time with their children. And a lot of time is taken up with ferrying children back and forth, where we used to walk to school and back or ride a bicycle because it was safe to do so. There are children who are struggling emotionally, and very little is available in South Africa in terms of help unless you can afford it or have really good medical aid cover. Substance use appears to be the norm for many young teenagers today, and maybe that's aptly due to us making it available to them by providing too much in the way of material goods and money. I see so many children and teenagers who are so indulged that they're not taught the limits at all. So what can be done about this? The first thing I think that we need to do, how do I turn it on? On here. What do I do? Oh, there we go. Okay. What do families need to do today? We need to talk. By that I mean talk meaningfully, even at a young age. Talk about feelings. Young children need to learn to identify their feelings and the feelings of others, not just happy and sad or angry. When a child looks unhappy, sit him or her down and ask what's going on in a gentle voice. What do they feel inside? Does it feel sore here? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel like your heart is sore? Maybe you're hurting. Maybe you're sad. Maybe it's because things didn't work out the way you hoped they would. Disappointed. In other words, you're teaching the words for how they feel. Initially, it can be a few simple feelings, and with maturity, these can grow and become more complex. I don't remember my parents ever sitting down and talking about feelings to me. So I grew up not actually being able to identify them initially. I had to learn. Those of you who grew up with at least one parent or adult you can talk to about feelings, learned how to reveal these and to feel safe doing so. You need to be the person that your child will turn to in times of distress and unhappiness. There is then less likelihood of them turning to substances or becoming severely depressed when in distress. Remember, talking about feelings helps us to offload. Also, being able to talk about one's feelings is really a positive human attribute. This doesn't mean that a child should be encouraged to talk to just anyone, but to be able to identify the adults whom they can trust. Should something negative or harmful occur, you need to know that your child will talk to a responsible adult, don't you? As a child becomes an adolescent, they're usually less inclined to talk about feelings. But if you have opened the door at an earlier age, hopefully he or she will feel safe opening up. Should you know where your child is at all times? This would be good. It's the ideal. But as they grow and mature, it might not always be possible. However, if trust has been established, the child can be asked to contact you no matter what time or where to tell you if they feel unsafe and want you to come. For example, your adolescent daughter is at a party. She doesn't consume alcohol. She's been told not to. And she's being teased because everybody else is drinking and she's not. So you might say to her something like, well, go and get a drink and pretend to drink it. Or do you want to say that you're not feeling well and I'll come and fetch you? So you don't necessarily tell her what to do, but ask her what she would like to do. Recently, I was with my niece in PE, and she's got two adolescent boys, and the younger one was with us having lunch. She's about 15. And we were talking about this, and I said to him, who do you talk to when you need to talk? And he looked at his mother, and then he said, my brother. And I said, and then he said, and then he tells mom. So at least it gets back to mom. I've always encouraged parents to allow their children to be independent, describing independence as the biggest gift you can give them. However, I do realize that this has become more and more difficult over the years, particularly in terms of physical independence in our society. I'm sure Sheldon is going to teach you about being financially independent, which is so important. I don't know if you heard this morning, I actually nearly phoned you, and I thought, no, I'm sure you know it all anyway. There's a guy that talks on a Tuesday morning about finances, and this morning the hour was about making your children financially independent. And he said at a very early age, you can give them the choice of, and I think I've heard you say it before, do you want a chocolate or do you want a packet of chips? But you can't have both, you decide. Or here's so much money and you decide. Also teach them to be able to take care of themselves in terms of making a simple meal, using the washing machine, hanging the washing on the line, etc. I think our children in South Africa are still far too reliant on home care. And when they eventually leave home, they have little idea of how to take care of themselves. The older of the two boys of my niece has started university this year, and he's living in a flat with another boy. And she said, I bought him an air fryer and a microwave, and he's able to feed himself. He does phone home for recipes every now and again, but I think it's very good considering that he was very dependent on her before he left. I know that some moms prefer to do the task in a specific way, but your children can learn these too, your way of doing it. And it can be built into pocket money, that they have to do specific tasks in order to earn their pocket money. All children misbehave at some time or other. Every parent faces the challenge of how to discipline her or his child. It can be frustrating when a child acts out or has a significant behavior problem. Children need limits and rules. A young child feels more secure when they know that an adult or someone older is in charge. There are many ways to give children rules and help change their behavior. Examples include positive reinforcement, which I'm going to talk about, timeout, taking away privileges, and physical punishment. Physical punishment, sometimes called corporal punishment, is anything done to cause pain or discomfort in response to your child's behavior. So it could be spanking, slapping, pinching, pulling, hitting, making them eat or drink something that it works anyway. It's just teaching a child how to act out when they're angry. And I know it certainly didn't work with me. That's how I was brought up, and it just made me more and more rebellious. Effective forms of discipline for children focus on teaching and guiding rather than punishment. Positive, appropriate behavior, setting clear limits and using consequences that are logical and related to the misbehavior. I'm going to explain that in a minute. Examples include positive reinforcement, timeout, and redirection. It's also obviously important to be a good role model. Listen to your child and focus on building a positive relationship. What is meant by these terms? Positive reinforcement is praising and rewarding good behavior to encourage its repetition. So even just saying, thanks, I noticed you picked that up off the floor. I appreciate that. Setting clear limits, establishing rules and expectations that are appropriate for the child's age and development. These obviously change as the child matures. Consistent consequences, applying consequences for misbehavior in a timely and consistent manner. I know this isn't always easy, especially when you're busy, tired, or not feeling well. But if your child knows what to expect each time he misbehaves or breaks the rules, it will eventually sink in. Timeout, providing a brief period of quiet time for a child to calm down and reflect on their actions. And to me, it's not about saying, get out of here and go and sit on the steps for half an hour. It's saying, I think you need some time out. How about 5 minutes in your bedroom to calm down, think about what's happened, and then you get together with the child and quietly talk about what has happened. How was he feeling? Why did he do that? And how did it make you feel? And why did you react the way you did? Redirection, offering an alternative activity or behavior when a child is starting to misbehave. This is particularly appropriate with a younger child. Distract them from what they're doing. It's often useful when a toddler has a tantrum. And I also used to say to people, when a toddler has a tantrum, try and ignore them, because eventually they stop. I don't know if you've ever seen that video where they were following a little boy and his dog through the house, and he was screaming and shouting and throwing a tantrum. And then he stopped, and the dog and he would walk a little bit further closer to where Mom was, and then he'd sit down and start again. And so he went on following her through the house, and she just ignored him, and eventually he stopped because he wasn't getting any attention. Active listening, paying attention to the child's feelings and perspective, which can help to resolve conflicts and build trust. This too is not always easy in the moment, but try asking the child why he did what he did. Was he feeling angry, left out, hurt? This may be the opportunity to teach the child about feelings. Help him to identify what he was feeling and how to manage these in an appropriate and acceptable manner. Logical consequences. Ensuring consequences are related to the misbehavior and help the child understand the impact of their actions. I often promoted what is called the STEP program, Systematic Training for Effective Parenting. If anybody is interested, I do have a handout that I used to give to parents that you can get a copy of. Some examples. Punishment expresses the power of personal authority. Father, Jim, turn off that TV. Mom and I are trying to sleep. In contrast, logical consequences express the reality of the social order. Logical consequences acknowledge mutual rights and mutual respect. Father, with the TV blaring. Jim, I realize it's Saturday morning and you enjoy your cartoons, but Mom and I are trying to sleep. So either turn the TV down or play outside. You decide what you'd rather do. Punishment is arbitrary or barely related to the logic of the situation. Mom shouting angrily, Susan, I've told you 1,000 times to keep your room straightened up. I can't vacuum the carpet with all that mess on the floor. So you can forget about going to the movies on Saturday night, which is probably not going to happen. In contrast, a logical consequence is related to the misbehavior. Mother, Susan, I'm going to vacuum the carpets today. I can't vacuum in your room if there are toys and clothes lying on the floor. So I'll place them in bags and put them in the garage if you decide not to pick them up. I've heard about that happening. Something I'd advocated to somebody who said they left their school clothes lying on the floor every day. And eventually it was, Mom, I don't have a clean shirt. Sorry, they're probably all dirty in the garage. You'll have to go and put a dirty one on. They take responsibility for the consequences, not you. Punishment is personalized and implies moral judgment. Father angrily, you took my hammer without permission. Don't you know that that's stealing? You know that stealing is wrong, and now you've lost it. Your allowance is cut off until the hammer is paid for. Logical consequences are impersonal. They imply no element of personal moral judgment. Hugh borrowed Dad's hammer without permission. He lost the hammer. Dad handled the situation by focusing on the personal fact that the hammer must be replaced. So he said, how will you replace that hammer, Hugh? Punishment is concerned with past behavior. Ralph made an agreement to be home at 5 o'clock, but he didn't arrive until 6 o'clock. His mother angrily shouted, Ralph, it's 6 o'clock. You're always late. How many times have you gone through this? You never seem to care. You can just stay home for a week and you can forget about the bike we talked about. Logical consequences are concerned with present and future behavior. Mother, the next time Ralph goes out, I'm sorry, but you're not ready to take responsibility for coming home on time. We'll try again tomorrow. Punishment threatens the offender with disrespect or loss of love. It's a put down. Mother has told Charles he could have the privilege of playing with the dog if he could take responsibility for feeding and watering the animal. Mother, moralistically, you did not feed Champ, so you may not play with him today. Maybe this will teach you the value of being responsible for your pet. When logical consequences are involved, the parent's voice is friendly and implies goodwill. Charles, Mom, I'm going to play with Champ now. Mom, matter-of-factly, no, Charles, you haven't taken time to give him his food and water today, but we'll try again tomorrow. Punishment demands obedience. Susan and Shelley are disturbing the meal by kicking each other under the table. Father says, you two knock it off right now or you'll go to bed without supper. Logical consequences permit choices. You may settle down or leave the table until you are ready to join us. Angry warnings, threats, and reminders may turn a consequence into a punishment. Where did we get to? Consistency is prime, and the outcome should be related to the behavior. If the same behavior occurs again, you remind the child of his choice the previous time, his choice, and hopefully that you followed through. Note that in the case, it was only one day, not a week, which would probably be impossible. This form of parenting can be used throughout the child's life, from an early age into adolescence. Let's say she's told she may stay out of the evening until a certain time. She's told that should she break this rule, she will not be allowed out the next time she wants to go out, but it's her decision. And you need to remember this when it happens and to follow through. It's basically about teaching the child to take responsibility for her own behavior. You need to be firm but fair. And obviously modeling good behavior is important. And parents do slip up, they're human beings. And again, it can be explained to the child that perhaps you made a mistake and you're sorry. Other options for managing behavior. There are many ways to encourage your child to have good behavior. The most important place is to have a healthy, positive, and supportive relationship with your child. That's why I started with saying that we need to talk to the child. Managing your child's behavior works best when you let your child know in advance what you expect of him or her. Clear limit setting provides children with a sense of safety, stability, predictability, and security. They know that you are in charge. Make sure you also praise your child's good behavior. Positive reinforcement leads to more of that behavior. Saying thank you for such behavior is a good idea, as is apologizing when you've lost it. Try sitting down quietly after it occurred and explain why it occurred, what happened. As a parent, it can be overwhelming to try and find an effective method of discipline. And if you are using physical punishment, consider using another method to promote good behavior in your child. Important and appropriate considerations are that the discipline needs to be age appropriate, and that's why it changes as the child matures. Discipline techniques should be tailored to the child's age and developmental stage. Consistency is important, with rules and consequences to help the child understand the expectations. A strong, loving relationship with a child is essential for effective discipline. But remember, you are the adult and you are in charge. I feel very sorry for children when I see that there's an enmeshed relationship, particularly with a single mom, if she's only got one child. Often there's a very enmeshed relationship and it doesn't turn out to be healthy. Focus on teaching. Discipline should be focused on teaching children appropriate behaviors rather than simply punishing them. Avoid harsh punishment. Harsh punishment can be detrimental to a child's development and well-being. By using a combination of these positive discipline techniques, parents can help their children learn self-control, develop positive behaviors, and build a strong parent-child relationship. Parents who were physically punished as children are more likely to physically punish their own children, or go in completely the opposite direction. Physical punishment may influence behavior in the short term. However, this form of discipline can result in the following consequences in your child: bullying other children, being aggressive, thinking that hitting is okay, behavioral problems, fearing his or her parents, poor self-esteem, increased risk of depression, anxiety, and personality problems. In extreme cases, we've heard of many of them in South Africa, it can lead to more severe abusive behavior towards children. And we know that this can land up in injury, loss of custody by the parent, arrest, jail time, and even death of a child. I don't know whether you've heard just recently about a child who was basically beaten to death by her father and sexually abused. It's just beyond belief that somebody can do that to their own child. What do you consider appropriate behavior and what are your family values? Very important that you know this. What are your values and that you and your partner agree on these? There's no point in having one disciplinarian in the family and the other one is the soft touch. That confuses a child. And they will play you one against the other as well. So it's very important that you're on the same page. And even if, what my parents always used to say, if I went to mom, she'd say, well, what did dad say? Because she knew that I'd been to him and asked him first, and he said no, and then I went to mom. So you need to check that you're both on the same page. I don't know if any of you have had problems with attention hyperactivity deficit disorder, ADHD, but I thought we should just touch on this. All children can be overactive at times, particularly at a young age, but this is usually only formally diagnosed when a child starts school. And it's not simply a very busy or noisy child. Discipline for a child with ADHD should focus on clarity, consistency, and positive reinforcement rather than punishment. It's crucial to stay calm, set clear expectations, and use structured approaches that address the child's specific needs. Positive reinforcement, such as praise and rewards for good behavior, is far more effective than harsh criticism or punishment with this child. Stay calm and try to model the desired behavior. When a child with ADHD is acting out, in other words, being uncontrollable, it's important for parents to remain calm and collected. And I know that's very difficult when you're in company or out in the shops or whatever. But losing your temper can escalate the situation and make it harder to correct the behavior. Children with ADHD learn by observing. So demonstrating the behavior you want to see is crucial. And please don't say something like, look at your sister, she doesn't do that. Why can't you be like other children? My brother had a problem with which I think now I've diagnosed as dyslexia. because he struggled at school, but he's bright. He owned his own company. So there was nothing wrong with his brain in terms of intelligence, but he struggled. And I had no problems at school. It wasn't that I was incredibly bright, but I didn't have any problems. And my parents used to all the time say, why can't you do what Pat does? And of course, that just built up an anger in him. And our relationship was very conflictual when I was a child. He was forever criticizing me. Set clear expectations and rules. Establish clear routines. Children with ADHD thrive on structure and routine. Use visual aids, visual schedules, checklists, and timers. And I remember seeing a child who, in the morning, always forgot to close the curtains and switch the light off when he left the room. So Mom started putting a sticker up at the door saying, have you closed the curtains? Have you switched off the light? So if he came out, she'd say, have you read the stickers? And he'd have to go back and read the stickers. Explain rules and expectations in a clear, concise, short manner using simple language. Break down tasks. Large tasks can be overwhelming. Breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps can help children with ADHD stay focused and motivated. You can't give them instructions to do two things, like go and wash your face and brush your teeth. Go and wash your face. Okay, now go and brush your teeth. They won't be able to do two or three things one after the other. Certainly not at a young age. Positive reinforcement and rewards is very important. Acknowledge and praise good behavior frequently, even small steps in the right direction. And use reward charts and systems, which can often be effective with ADHD. Again, at a young age, if you put up a chart showing when they've done something right, or when they've completed a task properly and they get a tick or a star or whatever, and when they've got so many stars, they get a reward. Focus on progress, not perfection. I think this goes with all children. Celebrate small victories and focus on the positive steps the child is taking rather than dwelling on setbacks. Consequences and redirection. Use natural and logical consequences as I suggested in the step. When a child misbehaves, try to use consequences that are related to the behavior. For example, as I said, leaving your clothing lying on the floor, I'm going to put it in a bag in the garage. In fact, I even had a wife once doing that with her husband because he left all his clothes on the floor, and she'd say, it's in the garage, go and have a look. When a child is struggling with behavior, try to redirect their attention to a more positive activity. And this often helps when a child, for example, is out, say, in a shop or something, and they start wanting something and their attention is completely taken up, to try and redirect them away from that. Avoid punishment. Harsh punishment can be counterproductive and may damage the parent-child relationship. And lastly, you might consult with a professional. If you're struggling with discipline or if your child's behavior is significantly impacting their life, consider seeking professional help with a therapist or counselor. Support and understanding is important when you have a child with ADHD. Educate yourself, learn as much as you can, Mr. Google, Dr. Google. Be patient and understanding. Remember that children with ADHD may struggle with impulsivity, hyperactivity, and inattention, and they need support and understanding to thrive. And you will not get them to sit down and do an hour of homework in the afternoon. It's always got to be in small batches. Connect with other parents. Sharing experiences with any problem you've got is often helpful. And then it comes to medication. It's probably one of the first things we think of with ADHD. And understandably, there are many parents who are reluctant to give their children medication. But often it is the answer, especially on school days. Remember that ADHD behavior can often be seen as being badly behaved, and the teacher is unaware that they've got ADHD or nobody's diagnosed it yet, and they're seen as being badly behaved, and the child is punished in the classroom for not being able to sit still or to stop talking. Medication usually results in improved self-image as the child is receiving less negative attention. Remember that the child may have very poor concentration, resulting in poor academic progress, but shows no signs of hyperactivity. This may be ADD without the hyperactivity. And this is the child that will sit in class and appear to be listening, but their mind is somewhere else. They're looking out the window and they're thinking about something else. They're not listening to what's going on at all. And it obviously affects their concentration and their ability in class. And they get very caught up in anything that they are enjoying doing, and they don't even hear you talking often. So that needs to be looked at too. I don't know whether this is important to you or not, but more and more nowadays we hear the popular term of somebody being on the spectrum. Autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. Although autism can be diagnosed at any age, it is described as a developmental disorder because symptoms generally appear in the first 2 years of life. It's a condition related to brain development that affects how people see others and how they socialize with them. This causes problems in communication and getting along with others socially. It'll be a child doesn't appear to have any friends at all, but it doesn't seem to bother them. This condition also includes limited and repeated patterns of behavior. It can be like even just hand flapping when they're agitated. It can range from the muted child to the child who is highly intelligent. Well-known personalities who've been diagnosed with autism and on the high end of the spectrum, we call that now the high end of the spectrum. It used to be called Asperger's, but we don't use that term anymore. Well-known people are Anthony Hopkins. I was quite surprised at that. And when I thought about it, I thought, he probably is. Elon Musk, that's not difficult to identify. Charles Darwin, Andy Warhol, Greta Thunberg, Bill Gates, Susan Boyle, and Daryl Hannah. I remember watching a series of short videos on Bill Gates, and he said how had his mother not forced him to come out of his room and interact with other children, he probably would never be where he is today with Microsoft. He was happy to just stay in his room and read and read and read. He was very, very intelligent, did extremely well at school, but he had no social interaction with other children until his mother forced it. Possibly most of these are on what we call level 1, meaning that they may struggle with social interactions, but are often very intelligent. Did anybody watch The Big Bang Theory? The young man in that had level 1 autism because he just had no idea what was going on when they were joking with him or being sarcastic, but very, very bright. Level 2 requires more support in terms of social interactions and with inflexible behaviors. Level 3 suffer from severe impairments in social settings and evidence severe inflexible behaviors. Remember that this diagnosis should not be seen as a judgment of the individual's worth. Let's focus on strengths. I remember a young woman coming to see me years ago. She wanted me to write a report for her church because their whole life revolved around the church, and she was expected to go to every activity that was on in the church. But she had diagnosed herself as being autistic, very bright on the high end of the scale. But she said, I don't want to go and interact with everybody. I don't enjoy it. Will you please write a letter to my minister, tell him that I've got autism and that I don't want to do this, which is what I did. Because she actually knew more about autism than I did at the time. She'd really looked it up. But she worked for her parents behind a desk in the back room, so she didn't have to interact with people in her job, so it worked out for her. Remember, there's no such thing as a normal brain. Other things that we need to look out with young children. Poor vision and hearing problems. If those are suspected, they need to be checked out at an early age. And then seizure disorders are also not uncommon, especially mild seizures, where the individual loses contact with what is going on around about her, but doesn't suffer from convulsions. And this is called petit mal epilepsy, where if you've ever seen anyone suffering from it, they will just suddenly just sort of blank out They're not hearing you. They're not really seeing what's going on. It can be just for a few minutes and then they go, oh, what were you saying? They've been out. I mentioned electronic equipment at the beginning. Because of my age, I'm really not that tech savvy. And I feel very, very sorry for parents having to deal with cell phones and tablets and everything that children have in their lives and what they see and hear. I heard somebody on the radio this morning saying, we used to be the one in charge, that we taught our children, but that's not happening anymore. They're teaching us because they know so much more about what's going on out there than we do. I'm absolutely gobsmacked at how much time teenagers spend on their phones and what and who they are interacting with. We all, I'm sure, aware of the cyberbullying that occurs, even if it's only in the form of criticism. And I've been seeing a young woman for a couple of years that it's just absolutely astounding as to what she receives on her social media and then how she responds as well. It's quite mind-blowing. I'm aware that some schools in South Africa and many in other countries have banned the use of cell phones during class hours, and I personally think this is essential. The debate rages on about at what age a child should be given a phone, and if use of it should be restricted at home too. That, I feel, is a personal decision, but please consider the negative effects on your child of going to bed with his or her phone. It's limiting sleep, and what is he watching? Are you following his usage? More and more, there are reports of severe and serious psychiatric problems being reported that are considered to be linked to online usage, even gaming. The sad thing, too, is that children in disadvantaged schools are missing out when it comes to the use of electronic equipment in schools. The gap, I fear, is widening. And then just a mention about depression and anxiety. I didn't have a slide up, but children can suffer from depression and anxiety at an early age. One just needs to be aware, and once again, getting the child to talk about his or her feelings is essential. Remember, too, that children experience grief and loss, just as adults do, but it may not be evident. You may try to get her to talk about her feelings, and again, this is where talking about how she's experiencing the feelings is important. And if you've already set up that relationship where you can talk about feelings, she's going to be able to talk about how she feels about Granny's death or whatever. Bedtime stories are an important time of family interaction. Children generally enjoy this, even when they're able to read themselves. That could be a time of getting the child to read to his siblings with you present. Saying a prayer together at bedtime is also a comfort to your child. I don't know if any of you have ever heard the prayer that I used to have to say when I went to bed, and only years later I thought, what on earth were they teaching me? As I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, and if I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. I should die. But I don't think I realized what I was saying. And in conclusion, the 70-30 rule in parenting young children is a gentle reminder that you don't need to be perfect all the time. The idea is this: if you're able to respond to your child's need with love and consistency 70% of the time, that's enough. The other 30%, it's okay to be imperfect. Remember, you don't have to be a perfect parent, just a good enough one. In fact, trying to be perfect is often a disadvantage to you and your child. Life is never perfect. As I said in the beginning, I'm aware that you as parents are under a great deal of pressure and that life, both at home and in the workplace, moves at a much faster pace than it did before the introduction of electronic technology. It's important that you, as parents, give yourselves regular me time. This may be just an hour to do nothing or to relax with each other. It's not a time to talk about problems or even the children. Do you have a regular date night with your partner? It's important to connect with each other. I know there's some parents who they say when they both get home, the first thing they do is they go and sit outside, have a cup of coffee or tea, and they talk to each other about their day. and the children are not allowed to come near them. If you're a single parent, the need is even greater to have time out. Is there someone who can care for your children just for a few hours so that you can relax? Maybe lie on your bed and read or watch TV, which I'm sure you can't do when your children are around. Don't ignore your own feelings. Please seek help if you think you're struggling. Even talking to a friend can be helpful. And if you are the friend that someone seeks out to talk to, be open to listen without giving too much advice. We often just need to offload. I'll never forget talking about offloading. When I started my master's, the man who'd been in head of the department had retired, but somebody always told the story about how he had this long-term young student that used to come to him every week, and the one time he fell asleep at the beginning of the session and he slept the whole way through, and the next week the student came back and he said, "That was the best session I've ever had. You gave me such good advice." And he didn't remember it. He'd slept the whole way through it. So being able to offload is more important than getting advice often. Remember that building a relationship with each child is the foundation of ongoing relationships and will make all the difference in the years ahead. Good luck.
Can I stay here? Is this camera fine? When I sat there, I realized parenting is tough. Thanks, Pat. Thanks for sharing. So my topic now is on basically the importance on raising your children to be financially literate, to be able to understand how to manage the money. And when Pat mentioned earlier about the guy on the radio speaking about teaching his children from a young age, I'm going to tell you that we did with our children who are now 19 and 17, and we started age 4 and age 6. So it's not that they are too young. From a young age, there are ways that you can start introducing money in whatever form into the system where they can slowly start making decisions. And the more decisions they make around finances, the better they're going to be later on. If we can get those slides up, there we go. And so Robert Kiyosaki uses the phrase an unfair advantage. And he says, if your children can go out into the world having been trained in finances, in money management, in other words, the things that they can learn from you as parents, you're going to give them an unfair advantage in life, because anybody that goes into the working world knowing how to manage their finances is going to be at an advantage to somebody who doesn't. And straight away, you're putting your child in a position where they can make better decisions to their peers. And that is the unfair advantage that he refers to. And so our children are growing up in this environment where primarily we don't see money management as important. We don't worry about what tomorrow is about to bring. We're in a society of instant gratification. Our children are part of the throwaway generation where you buy something and you replace it and you buy something else. And so if we don't learn to be good consumers, we don't know how to buy wisely and we don't know how to manage that money. And so in South Africa, you'll read so many things about our savings culture and that we are a nation with a poor savings culture. And I disagree with that, because I believe we are a nation that we are bad consumers. Because it's very difficult to save if you don't know how to manage the money in the beginning. If I gave anybody 2,000 Rand and I said to you, go and save this money, it's very easy. It's not your money. It's 2,000 Rand over and above your normal income that you're getting. It's easy to take that money and put it aside. But if I said to you, find 2,000 Rand of your current income to put away, it becomes very difficult, because that's the money that we've had to manage and learn to look after. And so the saving isn't the issue, because if you speak to many school-going children and you ask them, is it important to save? They'll tell you, yes, you must save. It's important to save. But if we can't manage our money, if we can't be good consumers, we're never going to be in a position to be able to save the money. And so most of us grew up in an environment, I think most of our children grow up in a home where they hear parents speak about money in a fearful way. And so most of the stuff that we hear is negative. It's negative words that are often related to money. We don't have enough. That's too expensive. We're not going to get by at the end of the month. We can't do that. Don't even consider that. And so a lot of the stuff around money management and money decisions in the home are linked to negative words. And so that's what we sort of become accustomed to. And the question I always ask parents is, why don't we do more? So why is it that we aren't doing more as parents for our children? I think the biggest thing is that, as Pat alluded to earlier, is that it's not something that we want to talk about. So sitting around a dinner table, speaking about finances and money as a topic is something we tend to avoid. It's a taboo subject. We've sort of got into this culture now where we're happy to speak about religion, sexuality, drugs, pretty much any other topic is acceptable, but let's not bring up money. We don't want to speak about money at the dinner table. We're not going to discuss that with our children. It's got nothing to do with our children. But all these other topics are fun, and we can go down that road, and we want to go there because we want our children to understand it and be a part of it and make decisions around these things. Finances, no. That's an adult topic that adults deal with. And so we grew up that we were never taught. And so again, we don't, and unless we change that habit, as Pat spoke about, somebody at some point needs to make the change. Otherwise, you're going to do what your parents did and your children will do what you did until somebody makes that change to go, actually, you know what, this is something that we do need to speak about. This is something that we are going to discuss. And then some of us just feel as though, well, where do we start? It's a minefield. We don't really know what to do. We've got it wrong ourselves so many times, and so we kind of avoid it for that very reason. So children, again, going back to Pat's message, is children don't often listen to us, but I can guarantee you as a parent, as an ex-teacher, and my wife being a teacher, children mimic us. Children will copy our behavior. So we can say a lot of things to our children as parents. Some of it will go in, but a lot of it won't. But I can guarantee you, you've probably seen your children at some point during a weekend playtime or whatever it is, copying your behaviors in how you parent, how you stand when you shout at them, how you do certain things. So children pick up on those cues without you having to teach them. And when it comes to money management as well, they're reading those same sorts of cues in the things that you say and what you do are very different. So the family that keeps telling the children, we've got no money, we're struggling, we can't afford that, but then mom's having her hair done and her nails done every week and dad's on the golf course every Saturday, those two things don't work because on the one hand, mom and dad are living the life of luxury, but when things are needed for little Johnny, they keep getting told there's no money in the home, we can't afford it, we don't have it. And so those are the things we have to be careful of. What we say and what we do need to tie in. Our children are grow up, and again, in a world that is very different. So I grew up watching my parents, and probably the early start of my career was on the left. It was part of a generation which sort of viewed loyalty towards a business. You started somewhere and you ended somewhere, and generally you came out at the end with some kind of a pension or whatever it is. And so that was what the old generation were accustomed to. Our children are going into a world which is very different to that. A lot of them will have entrepreneurial skills and will want to be their own manager or their boss or run their own little business. Some will be part of small little businesses who don't see sort of the loyalty side of things and may not offer employee benefits. And so if they're not managing their finances, if they're not looking after their future, there's going to be very little for them to one day settle and retire with. And so these two worlds, we kind of sit in the middle of that at the moment, where this new generation of children that are coming out of the schooling system are going to be part of a very different sort of working culture. And if the children going into this sort of new environment are not equipped financially, they're going to make very stupid decisions with their money. And doing well at school doesn't guarantee you financial success later. In fact, I'm a financial planner. I deal with a lot of clients when it comes to managing money, and I can tell you that there are a lot of people who are very academically strong, who run very successful businesses financially, but in their personal capacity make poor money management decisions. And so just having the intelligence of getting through school and university and having degrees and whatever else behind your name doesn't guarantee you success financially later in life. Because there's this thing that we kind of all, again, going back to the subject, but we sort of gear our children around academics and culture and sport at school, and we're happy to go for private lessons and extra lessons and make sure they're doing well at school. But again, we do very little in the education side of teaching our children to manage money better. I'm going to quickly touch on these because these are important, but we don't want to spend too much time. So money personalities are important, and if you can understand that in yourself, and if you've got a spouse or a partner in your home, there's going to be different personalities as well. And so you're going to have people who are comfortable spending money. You're going to have people that don't like spending money and like to hoard money. You've got people that are free in giving money to others. And so there's these different personalities that come to play within family homes as well. And your children, in managing their money, will have a personality based on who they are, what they've seen, and what they understand with finances. And so in our own home, if I take our two daughters have grown up with the same set of rules, the same sort of education when it comes to financial literacy and money management, but both are very different. The one is very conscientious, and she's a good manager of money and a good saver. And the other one is, we always thought less so, and more sort of a spender and a waster of money. But as she's sort of grown up, we've come to realize that all that sort of training from a young age, which again seemed to not make any sense because it didn't seem to be hitting home, I realized a little while ago in speaking to her, it had actually made a difference. And it came out in a conversation where she wanted to purchase something, and she's always been very happy to buy stuff with her money. But she didn't want to make the purchase because she had set herself a goal that in her bank account she wanted to never drop below 1,000 Rand of savings. Now, that's a wonderful achievement for a young teenage person to have. And again, I believe it comes from the discipline that was instilled when she was 4 years old, and we sort of tried to train her into that habit. So as much as she has this personality of wanting to spend, there's a bit of that sort of behavior that's gone into her where she has actually taken in the importance of why do you save, and she has set herself goals without my wife and I even realizing she was doing it. So these sorts of things are important to understand in your children. The personalities can be handled very differently if you understand what those money personalities, and there's a lot of that kind of stuff online that you can research. Budgeting is crucial, and there's a lot of homes not doing it. In fact, there's a lot of successful business people who run their businesses to a cent and then go home and just there's a squander of money. There's no sort of need to control money or decide where the money's going or how it's going to be spent. And then they sort of wake up at the end not realizing what happened. Budgeting is vitally important, and for kids to start understanding that from an early age. And I think that is one of those conversations you can have at the dinner table with your children from when they're small, is let them be a part of the budget process to go, let's sit down with our numbers. Let's have a look where mom and dad spend money, and let's make decisions around some of the things that we're doing around the entertainment, around going out for supper. Those sorts of things you can incorporate, and then you're having the conversation that Pat spoke about at the dinner table. You're bringing them in, and they're helping to make decisions around this kind of stuff, which is very important. And I'm going to get you one or two of those stories briefly. And then the needs and the wants. And if we can't establish those from a young age for children, then that sort of scary little thing comes of debt later in life. And that's where I'm finding a lot of our sort of older 20, early 30-year-old people are landing up because they don't know how to manage that money from their first paycheck. And so they're going into this world not really knowing what to do with it. And all of a sudden, they've got a lot of money in their bank account, and then it's the new car, and they're doing this and doing that. And before they wake up, they've already accumulated a fair amount of debt. And then to get out of that is going to take another 5 to 10 years. And so they never really move forward in life. Again, it comes just from understanding the things on needs and wants being taught to you from a young age. So I'm going to quickly go through these brief stories. So the cost in raising a child, and I don't know if people with young children have had a look at this. So last year I was reading an article done from Actuarial Science, guy at one of the insurance company, and they estimated the cost of raising a kid currently in South Africa in a middle income home. So this is not private schooling or anything like that. From the age of 0 to 18 is around about 2.5 million rand. That's what it's going to cost you to raise your child. I'm going, if it's going to cost you that much as an investment, surely you want to get a return at the end of this thing. So make sure that when you let go of that 2.5 million rand investment, it's not going to come back. It must go and be financially independent, go off into the world, making good decisions. So that cost of raising a child, it's important to understand what it is costing you to raise this child. And if you understand that, and money is a concern to you, make sure that you're going to do it properly. The second one is the tip collector. And again, going back to those stories of how do you have these conversations. So this was told to me, like any South African family going on a holiday. So let's say we're off from East London, we're going down to Cape Town. It's a long trip. Along the way, you're probably going to be having stops for a breakfast or lunch or whatever. And so this family did the journey down and had their regular sort of 3-hour stops along the way. And eventually at one of the stops, the father realized that the little boy was lagging every single time they left the restaurant and went to the car. And eventually at the one stop, he turned around and he said to the boy, "What's the story? Every time we leave, you're always behind and we've got to watch you because there's cars and it's not safe." And he said, "Every time you leave money on the table." And so I've been collecting that money. So again, the little boy's sort of idea of what had happened was the dad was forgetful, money was being left behind, and so he was making sure that that money wasn't getting left and lost, and so he would collect his dad's tips all the time. It's a teaching moment. So it seems now it's funny, but at the time it's a teaching moment. So something for an adult seems obvious, that's what you do. But for that little boy, it didn't make any sense why his dad would leave money on the table and then walk away. And so he was just making sure that he was looking after his dad. And so our girls, every time that we've gone out from a young age, Annabelle, our oldest one, who's 19 now, she used to be the tip person. In other words, the bill would come in and we would explain to her how we give a tip and what sort of the norm is in South Africa. And then we would have the discussion whether the person provided a service beyond the norm and is the tip worth more than what the expected amount is. And as time went on and Grace became older, she's taken over that responsibility. And so it's her decision at the end of an evening to decide on the tip. So she's part of the conversation. She understands why we do it, and she has to make a decision with the money that we're going to spend, but she makes the decision as to what tip is allocated to the waiter. And then a holiday plan, and this is a brilliant one as well, was shared with me from a family after one of my talks, is the family had decided they were going to be doing a holiday the following year, and so they sat around at the table, and the dad said, "Look, this is the plan. I've calculated what the expected budget is for this holiday. Mom and I are in this position where we can afford X towards that. We need to come up as a family with this amount." We have a look at the budget, and for the children, the two of them, they had to find a way in the budget to find the additional money. And isn't that just a clever way for you to be able to go, you know what, we're spending so much on eating out. Why don't we cut that down? Instead of going twice a month, let's go once a month and we can put that money into our holiday fund. But the children, as Pat said earlier, you create the opportunity. It's this or that. So we have the holiday or we don't, we must decide. But if we're going to have we've all got to pull our weight here and we've got to come up with a plan. We've got to find a strategy. So if we've got Netflix and Disney and Prime and whatever those other ones are, do we need to have all of those, or can we go for 3 months and just pay for 2 of the subscriptions or whatever it is? Find ways in your family to plan for those kinds of things. Pocket money is one of those things. Is do we do it? Don't we do it? And again, if you Google it, you'll find a lot of people saying you shouldn't and a lot of people saying you should. Our family did it, and I believe it worked. And it's how you do it, I think, that is probably the negative side of giving your children pocket money. Our purpose behind it was very simply, when you go and work one day, there's 3 things that your money can do. You can spend it, you can save it, or you can give it. Those are the 3 things. And if you can teach children from a young age that those are the 3 principles of managing your money, and you can get those right, then all you're doing is you're carrying that through into your working life. And so from a young age, from that 4 and from that 6, our children received 5 Rand every single week, a 2 Rand, a 2 Rand, and a 1 Rand. And they had to take the 2 Rand and they had to spend it. I'm going to come back to that now because I think that's where the problem with pocket money lies. They had to spend that 2 Rand They had to take 2 rand and they had to put it into their savings part of their money box, and the 1 rand had to go with them on Sunday school to Sunday and had to be given away. And so their 5 rand had to be allocated like that. And so from a young age, we taught them that. We made them do that. They didn't have to come up with that decision. We gave it to them so that later in life, as their pocket money grew, they started making those decisions as, how much do I spend? How much do I save? How much do I give? But the habits and the principles were there. I want to go to the spend because I think that's the most important one. There's so many people have a bank account for their children that they put money into, and they tell granny and grandpa and uncle and auntie to put birthday money and Christmas money into that, and then they'll tell people, my son has saved so much money. They haven't. They've done nothing to do with that saving. You've created an account and you've accumulated money in there for them. The children haven't made a decision. Like earlier when I said to you, 2,000 rand, go and save it. It's easy to do it that way. I think we've got to get it right, and we've got to teach children how to spend money, and that they're willing to part with their money. I think that's the biggest thing, is that if you save all that money and you give Johnny that money, he's going to do one of 2 things. He's going to blow it, or he's not going to want to spend it. And so he's going to become this hoarder who's now got so much money, but he doesn't want to share it. He doesn't want to spend it on anything. And so you've created another monster on the other side. We've got to find that middle ground where our children are comfortable in taking the money and spending it. And with the spending, you learn how to make good decisions. And my wife will attest to this. Our children learn so many good lessons from having to spend money, because you have to make a decision with that. Is, do I want this or do I want that? And if I buy that and I don't like it, well, it was my decision and I'm disappointed with that. But next time I know that's not what I wanted. I actually wanted this. And you've got to make those decisions. You've got to give children the opportunity to make the decision for themselves. And I think that's where we get it wrong as parents, is we're not giving our children enough opportunity to spend money. And so at one of our talks, a lady came up to me once and she said, Shilda, I don't know if I can do the pocket money thing, because I can't commit every week or every month, because of the way we earn money. We're not always in a position. I don't want to let my children down by saying this month you're not going to get. And as we were chatting, I realized they've got one vehicle, and on a Wednesday, she left work, fetched her daughters, and went to fetch the husband, where they had to sit outside his work for a while until he finished work. And during that time, every single Wednesday, there was a butcher shop, and she would give her daughter 50 rand to run into the shop and buy biltong, and she would come back and sit in the car, and they would chatter and eat the biltong. I said, but isn't that the perfect opportunity? You don't have to give pocket money, but instead of sending her in with the 50 rand to buy biltong, send your daughter in with the 50 rand and say, whatever you come back with is yours, you keep it. Go and buy the biltong, and if you don't spend all the money, you keep that money and you put it aside, because now you've bought something, but you can also save some of that money. You don't have to. And she said, you won't believe what happened. 30 rand biltong was sufficient, and she would often come back with a 20 rand note. So it cost her no extra money. It's the same 50 rand every single week the daughter running. But the daughter was now making a decision with that money, is, do I spend all 50 or do I spend a little bit less? I still get the biltong. We're still going to sit and have a conversation, but I'm going to be able to keep some of that money. And so in that situation, you've created an opportunity for the child to make a sensible decision with the money. And so you're still spending the money, you're still getting what you want, but you've made it slightly different in that there's an incentive for you to make a better decision with that spend. And so those things are important for children to understand from a young age. And I believe the only way to get there is to, pocket money is one, but 2 is to create those opportunities. And so we would, even from a young age, we would send our daughter into the spa to just, here's money, go and buy bread and milk. And there's a training program in that as well, in making a good consumer, is that she needed to, one, she was more intelligent than our youngest one, but she kind of knew which bread we bought her, and she knew which milk, and we could trust her. So she would go in, I would be able to drop her outside the spa where we lived, close to where we lived in Abbotsford, be able to drop her after I fetched her from school, and I could watch her, and she could go in at the age of 6 and go and buy bread and milk for her family. But she was learning to become a good consumer. In other words, she would take the money, go, pay, and she knew roughly what the change was going to be, because she had done it a few times with me, and so she learned those kinds of things. And those are opportunities that we can use. I can share many of those stories that we've experienced, and people have come to me telling me we've done this as a result of just listening to them, just thinking slightly differently. So it's important, I think, that our children need to be better spenders than savers, because if you spend wisely, you've got more money to save. So with any learning thing, there comes a challenge, and I'm quickly going to go through this. Has to be some kind of a commitment from the parents. And again, it goes down to what Pat said earlier. Both of you have to be on the same page. Both of you have to be making sure it's no good sitting at the table and one person doesn't want to have the conversation and one wants to. If you're going to go down the pocket route money, both of you have to be committed to be behind this plan and driving it. And sometimes it took us many hours in Toys R Us having to wade through the aisles for them to make sensible buying decisions. But that was what the learning part was about, is that when it came to time for them to spend that money, we needed to be a part of that so that if there were questions, we could answer those questions. But their decision would always be their decision, and many mistakes were made. And I think the important thing here as well is as your kids get older, don't bail them out of their mistakes when they're young. It's easy to fix a mistake of 5 rand. 500,000 rand later, debt is very difficult to fix as a parent who's about to go on retirement. Let them make the mistakes early because you can fix those. Don't bail them out all the time. And children, I hear so many stories of children going off to university and mom and dad just keep sending more and more money. There's no responsibility to have to manage the money or make decisions because they know, well, if I ask, there'll be some more money in my account the next day. You've got to plan, you've got to be ready for those teaching moments. You've got to be patient, and you just got to keep it simple. Keep it simple. Don't try and be technical when it comes to having the discussions of where do I start. Start very simply, like a budget, holiday planning, whatever it is. Where do we cut back? Okay, so quickly in conclusion, take advantage of those teachable money moments. They happen all the time. In fact, I think every one of us sitting here today has had a moment that we've had to make a decision on money. We've had to spend money. We've had to do something with money. It happens all the time in our everyday life. Money is probably the most important thing, I think, we need to know about, and yet we don't spend enough time teaching our children. Set a good example. So it's not always easy. Money does control us. It's difficult, but just be aware of the things that we say. Try and be a good example, a good role model to your parents as to how you speak about money, how you manage it. Help your children to set those savings goals for themselves and work towards those things. Don't be afraid to speak openly about it. And we've had many discussions around finances, around money, and it's been eye-opening over the years as to what your children take in and what they've learned from those conversations where, again, you think it's not going in, but eventually it does sink in. And then learn with your child. I'm going to end off with this quote because I love it. Malcolm Gladwell says, 10,000 hours to perfection. And the sooner you start, the quicker you get to your 10,000 hours. Because if you spend the time, every little bit of information that you plant, every bit of advice that you can give, any sort of thing, I always say to people, where do you start? Start with what you know with, because that's already an advancement of what the child knows. So even though in your own head you might think, I don't know much, you still know far more than the 8-year-old. And so any little bit of information that you can have, the quicker you can get your child to 10,000 hours of just making good decisions, managing their money, they're going to have an unfair advantage later in life. If you have questions, you can always get hold of me through Nahoon Methodist Church. I know for the people watching online, there'll probably be some kind of a link, but if you guys go back, but if you have questions, I know I rushed through it. There's actually so much that can be shared on it. But yeah, hopefully it just gives you a little bit of sort of a seed for thought for you to try something different. And just know that the subject is important. And if you can do a little bit for your children, you're going to be able to give them a head start later in life. Thank you for coming. For next week, I'll tell you 2 very good speakers, brilliant speakers, who are going to do that. So they're going to be able to sort of tie in the parenting and the teaching side of things. Both of them are qualified teachers who, between them, the one has almost got the kids through school, the other one has got small children coming through the schooling system. And so there must be, there's 13 years of children in school at some point who are just going to be sharing valuable tips of what you can be doing as a parent, how you can be interacting with teachers and schools and making sure, again, your kid has an unfair advantage. Take those tips and be able to use them to your advantage to help your child just be better prepared. So thanks for coming, and I hope next week we'll see you with a whole lot of others. Thank you.